wanted to get into some code so you can kind of see how all of this works together. I already have some of the code in here because it's going to take too long to type the whole thing. So let me go through what I already have, and then the plan is for us to basically fill in what we need. So this program is going to get test scores from the user, and then it's going to calculate the average of the test scores after it drops the lowest score. So with this program, we're getting test scores from the user. We don't necessarily know ahead of time how many test scores they're going to enter. So we want to dynamically allocate memory after we find out how many test scores the user is entering. And then what we're going to do is we want to drop the lowest test score. So we could theoretically go through, we could do this a few different ways. We could go through the array and find the lowest score and just leave it out when we calculate the average. Or we could sort the array, and then we know that the lowest, so we could sort the array in ascending order, and then we know that the lowest test score is going to be the first element in the array. So then when we calculate our average, we can just use the second element and so on to calculate the average. So we have a couple function prototypes here, and I'm going to actually just go down and look at the functions. So they're at the bottom. So we have our sorting function, and this function is just a selection sort. So this is just basically the same code we were using for the sorting functions before out of Chapter 8. The only difference is this is using a pointer as a parameter instead of the reference variable. We're sending this function a pointer to the first element in the array, and then we're sending it the size of the array. And then other than that, this sorting function is basically identical to what we were doing before. So this is just going to sort the array in ascending order. And then after the array is sorted, we're going to calculate the average of the scores after we drop the lowest score. And we're going to type the code for this, but we're sending this function a pointer to the first element of the array and then the number of scores. So let's look at what the main code is, or what the main function is doing. So in the main function, we have some variables. So we have our number of test scores, and this is a number that we're going to get from the user, but we've initialized it to 0 initially, just until we find out how many test scores there are. And then we have a pointer that we've initialized to null pointer. And then we have a variable for our test average, which we've initialized to 0. So what we want to do is get the number of test scores. So we're going to write code for that. Validate the number of test scores. So we're going to make sure that they don't try and say that they have a negative number of test scores. We're going to then allocate an array to hold the test scores, or the number of test scores that the user enters. Then we're going to get the test scores. So we're just going to use a loop and get the test scores from the user. And then this is where we're going to call these functions. So first we're going to sort the array. So we're going to put it in ascending order. And then we're going to calculate the test average with this function where we calculate the average with the lowest score dropped. And then all of the code is already here for displaying the results to the screen. So we're just going to basically go through and get the number of tests from the user, allocate the new memory, or allocate the memory for the array, and then get the scores from the user. So let's do that. What do we want here? So we want to get the number of test scores from the user. So what should we put here?
Well, the user that entered their test score.
Yeah, so cout.
CN test score.
Well, right now we're just asking how many test scores they have, right? So, and then CN, and then this is just going to be num test scores. So num test scores. And then we want to verify that they don't enter a negative number. So what kind of loop should we use? Yeah, a while loop. This is going to be while, and then what should our condition be?
Test score is less than 0 or greater than 100.
Well, this is just the number of test scores that they're going to enter, because we're trying to figure out how large the array needs to be. So it could be any number greater than 100.
So as long as it's not negative, not less than 0.
Yeah, so as long as num test scores is greater than or less than 0.
We're going to have it repeat because that's not valid.
Yeah, so then we're going to say, well, I'll just prompt them with something. So number of test scores can't be negative. And then we're going to ask them to re-enter a number. So cout. Actually, we could just copy and paste this into there. All right, so that should take care of that part. And then this comment goes up here. Okay, so now allocate an array to hold the test scores. So this is what we learned today. What did we call our pointer? So we just call the pointer pointer.
Star pointer.
But we've already.
Right, double star pointer.
Yeah, but we've already declared that. So we can just say, like, let's go back and look at this real quick. So yeah, right here.
You just do pointer equal. Interesting.
Yeah. So it's just going to be the name of our pointer is equal to new, and we have doubles this time. So let's go back to the code. So we have pointer is equal to new double, and then what goes here? Yeah, num test scores. All right, so the next thing we want to do is get the test scores, and we want to validate the input as we're getting the test scores. So for this one, we could say that it has to be between 0 and 100, or we could just say it has to be greater than 0. But what kind of loop do we want to use to go through the array? Yeah, for loop. So for, and then this is just going to be a counter. So I'm just going to say int I, and then what do we need to start this at? Yeah, 0. And then I less than num test scores. And then I plus plus. All right, so I'm going to prompt the user. I'm going to ask them to enter a test score. So enter test score. And then I want to let the user know what number we're on. So for instance, if the user says they have 100 test scores, I want the user to know, okay, we're on the first test score, we're on the second, third. So how can we display the number that we're on to the user? Say that again. Yeah, it's the counter, but yeah, +1. And then this is, let's just do this. And then cin, and then what's going to go here? And then, Yeah, plus I. And so this is with the pointer notation. We could also use index notation with this. So I'll just. So this is dereferencing the pointer, and actually, yeah, because this is called pointer. So this is dereferencing the pointer. So our pointer is currently pointing at the first element of our array we just created. So we're going through the array, and we're saying, so the first iteration, the pointer is pointing at the first element in the array. But then when we do the plus I, so the first time through I is 0, right? So this is just dereferencing pointer, which is pointing at the first location in the array, or the first element. Second time through, we have pointer plus 1. So now it's going to be pointing at the second element in the array. So if we dereference that location, we can store, we're just storing whatever the user enters to that location. Yeah, and we could also do this, so this is using pointer notation. We could also do this with just index notation. So then this would be what?
Pointer, bracket, I, bracket.
Yeah, pointer, I. So you can use either of these and they're going to do the same thing. All right, so now we're at sort the test scores, get the average of the test scores. So what we want to do now is write the code for the function to drop the lowest test score. And we're assuming that our array is in order because we have this sorting function that's sorting our array and putting it in ascending order. So we're assuming that, so what we've done so far, we've written the code to get the number of test scores from the user. We've allocated an array that's the size of, that has a number of elements as scores that the user said they were going to enter. We've gotten the test scores from the user and stored them to the array. And we've sorted the array. And we didn't write the code for that. That was already here, but that's just a sorting function. And then now we want to calculate the test average, dropping the lowest score. So we want, and we're sending this function, the pointer, so basically it's the pointer for the first element. It's pointing at the first element in our array, and then the number of test scores. So let's go down and write the code for this function. And we can just look at the comment for this function. So this says, the average drop lowest function calculates and returns the average of the values stored in the array passed into the scores parameter with the lowest score dropped. Because the array must already be sorted in ascending order, the first element is not included in the calculations. The parameter num scores holds the number of elements in the array. Okay, so this kind of already told you the hint. We're just not going to count the first element when we add up all of our scores, but if we want to calculate the average, what do we need to do? Like, we need to do 2 steps.
Accumulator.
Yeah, so we're going to need an accumulator. So we should probably declare that, right? And so let's just, what should we call it?
Average.
Well, it's not the average. Yeah, total is equal to 0. And then we're just going to go through, we're going to step through the array and add everything up, right?
Except for the first element.
Yeah, except the first element. So what kind of loop do we want to use for that? Yeah, for, and then, yeah, exactly. Because, yeah, this time we're not going to include the first element, so we're going to start at 1. And then I, let's see, is going to be less than what? Yeah, num scores, and then I plus plus, and then what do we want here? Yeah, so if we just use score plus I, then we'll type it both ways. So let's start with this. Let's just put a comment and type the code for the other way that we could do this. So how could we access this using the pointer notation? This is what you were starting to say.
So you need an asterisk.
Yeah.
And then parentheses score plus I.
Yeah. So score plus I. And in your lab, I've specified to use the pointer notation, but really you can use either and they're equivalent. Okay, and then what do we want to, well, we can either calculate the average and then return that, or we can just return, if we just do return, we want to return the average, so how can we do that?
Score divided by scores minus 1. Total divided by mean score.
Yeah. Num scores. And then the -1 is, don't forget that. And I'm going to actually put this in parentheses just so it's a little more obvious. All right, let's see if this runs. It's probably not going to compile because I made the mistake of typing everything before compiling. That's usually not a good thing. Okay, so let's see if it compiles. Whoops.
Scores, yeah, scores.
There's some scores here. Yeah, so there's something wrong. Actually, what line was that? Oh, it's Num test scores. All right, so let's run it. How many test scores? Let's just do a low number, 5, yeah. All right, average is 76. Someone calculate that average real quick and leave the 12 off. Someone with a calculator, see if it's right.
Plus 100 plus 30 what?
34. Yeah, is that right? Okay, good. Looks like our program's working.